Hi, everyone. This is Jason Holland. I am the owner and travel butler from Travel Simplicity. I am very happy to be able to connect you with someone on the other side of the world. This is a friend of mine and one of our local travel butlers in New Zealand, Jean-Michel. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good. Very good. What time is it there? It's 4 o'clock in the evening or in
Yeah,
the afternoon here.
here it's 8 a.m. tomorrow for you.
Nice and early.
Nice to know.
We just missed the sunrise, I guess.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I thought it might be good this morning, which is why I set up out here, but it wasn't as spectacular as usual.
It looks like you got a little bit of clouds.
A few clouds, but they're usually pretty nice. Oh, hang on. I'll just take you for a little wander to have a look what's behind us. This is the backdrop from home, and the cloud formations we get here are spectacular. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Jean-Michel, where is home for you?
Where we are here is in central Otago. So it's actually the middle of nowhere as far as New Zealand's concerned. A lot of New Zealanders don't know this particular part of the country. But we're right in the middle of the country between Queenstown and Dunedin. So what that means is way down south and probably an hour and a half from civilization.
Okay, all right. On the South Island?
On the South Island, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
A
Yeah, so
beautiful part of the country.
Yep, it's a lovely part of the country, which is what you have behind you.
I was going to say, for those people who don't maybe know or recognize this, my background, I'm not there right now, but this is a place where I was a couple years ago. This is on the South Island in New Zealand. I was there staying with some friends down in Christchurch, and we went jet boating back in these mountains, and it's just absolutely spectacular. I mean, this was not Photoshop. This is what it looks like. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You have I was telling Jean-Michel before everyone came on here, and I'll say it again, but of all the places I've ever traveled to in the world, New Zealand is in the top 4. I absolutely love it. I think it's amazing. The people are friendly. The food is delicious. The nature is just majestic, and it's maybe the only place that my wife and I actually would have considered living.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got some very nice places back over in the States.
Well, we do. That's true. But
yeah.
New Zealand's pretty special. So I wanted to hear some stories about New Zealand. What are some of your favorites?
My favorites, that's actually quite easy for me to answer. Probably my all-time favorite is time spent with Maori here in New Zealand. And Maori are the First Nation of New Zealand. And I sort of describe them as the South Pacific Sioux. And they're very proud, best friends you can have, worst enemies you can have, love their music, love sharing, really, really nice people.
And those now one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the distinguishing characteristics oftentimes with the Maori is the facial tattoos. Is that correct?
Well, that's like everything. There's a quick answer and there's a very long answer.
Okay.
The tattoos are definitely something. For them to make it to the face, they have specific significance. So
Really?
Tattoos here on the cheek, that's a warrior.
Okay.
And if you've got the tattoos here, that's a chief. Then if you've got the tattoos coming down there, that's a spiritual leader. So if you see someone with this and that, then whoa, that's the big kahuna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But most Maori will have something on their shoulder, and the tattoos again, they're not pictures, they are genealogy. So Maori actually had no written language, so they kept their stories in carvings, which is why they got such an extensive number of carvings around the country, and some of our favorite people are carvers. So what they've got on their bodies is carving. It just happens to be with ink, but it's the same sort of thing, and it has lots of stories. So you'll have lots of little notches, and and that could be 30 generations that they can talk back to. I've got a Maori chief friend way up north, and you can sit with him and you can ask him to where he comes from, and he will sit there opposite you, and for 5 minutes he'll tell you about. It sounds biblical, you know. So and so was the son of so and so, who was the son of so and so, who was the daughter of so and so, and he goes right the way through that for at least 30 generations.
Wow,
So a
that's
lot of
incredible.
yeah, that's what they have in their tattoos, so that they're meaningful. They look at other people's tattoos and they say, "Why have you got drawings on yourself?" Yeah, we haven't got drawings. We've got history. Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's fantastic. Now, how did you, I mean, how have you developed these relationships with Maori?
By being curious and by being respectful. I've been able, 20 odd years ago, I started going up to them and talking to them and saying, yeah, if I brought a visitor over, would you be able to show them this? Would you be able to show them that? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? And then 20 years of that, you develop some very strong friendships.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of First Nation people, once you've developed that friendship, it is absolutely rock solid, far more solid than a business agreement. Once you've got one, then the second one's easier, third one's easier, fourth one's easier, and then you just have to say, "Sorry, guys, we can't,
We can't do anymore.
we can't do anymore." Yeah. But they're lovely people, and they love sharing. And there's two concepts to Maoridom. There's two things you don't have to remember these words: kaitiakitanga and manakitanga. And they're
Say that again. Say that again.
Kaitiakitanga and Manaakitanga. So Kaitiakitanga is literally guardianship, and that means looking after your environment. It's a fundamental Maori thing, and taking responsibility for things. And that's come right through into the New Zealand psyche, which is another interesting story. What we see here as New Zealanders are actually a blend of European and Maori, and that's the unique mindset that we've got here. Second one, Manaakitanga, is treating every visitor like they are your grandmother. So with a huge amount of respect. Yeah, phenomenal concepts. Very, very strong concepts. And they're natural, as you'd expect, they're natural hosts. If that's your fundamentals, if those are your fundamentals, then when you look after people, wow, it's hosting like none other.
That's really special. Well, that's a good first answer. I really like that. So what are some of what's something else that you really love about New Zealand?
A lot of people talk about helicopters, and New Zealand's actually got the highest number of helicopters per capita of everywhere in the world. And the reason for this is geography. It's a relatively small landmass. It's not that small. It's still the eastern seaboard of the US, but a relatively small landmass with a lot of mountains. So often a 4-hour road trip can translate into a 1-hour helicopter trip because of the rugged terrain. So we've got helicopters. We love helicopters. And the one place I would say to anybody that I would strongly recommend to take a helicopter is down the southwest part of the South Island. That's where Milford Sound is. And you've got a combination of alpine mountains. You can fly over glaciers. You can peek inside some crevasses from your helicopter and see the deep blue ice there. But you've got a really varied terrain. So the eastern side of the Southern Alps is very dry. Mm-hmm. So you'll get tussock and not a lot of growth. The western side is extremely wet. Okay. And the difference, something like 7 meters of rain on one side per year, on the other side, 2 inches per year. Enormous difference. So on the west coast, you've got rainforest, real deep, difficult rainforest, and those difficult fjords. So stunning. And so up in a helicopter around there, ideally as a full day trip with a picnic, for me is one of the top experiences. So those are probably my two. One time spent with Maori, because that's really connection, and it connects you deeply with the country. And the other one, helicopter over some of the most spectacular scenery in the world.
I think that sounds amazing. One of the things you talked about rainforests and all the rainfall and I was one of the things that's just I was blown away by were the size of the trees and the
Uh,
vegetation in New Zealand. I just you drive along and you'd have these rows of trees that are your basically are made to be your fences for a field or something like that,
yeah,
and you guys would just literally trim the sides and the top, and they're standing, I don't know what, 25, 30 feet in the air, and it's
yeah,
like, it's like a hedge you would see driving through England, but
yeah,
it's 4 times the height.
yeah, yeah. We have that here, but we're also quite lucky here. Just around the corner and on this property, we've got 14 sequoias that were planted when this property was first settled. This was one of the first farming stations on the South Island here. So it was settled in the 1850s. So we got these 170-year-old trees just around the corner, which is pretty nice. Yeah. So we've been blessed with a decent, not so much here. This is one of the lowest rainfall areas in the country, but the country in general has been blessed with a decent climate. And definitely up north, they get 2 growing seasons a year, because for us, the north is warmer, the south is colder.
Yeah.
So the south would probably be a bit like your Colorado weather, whereas north would be a bit like Florida and Florida Keys. So quite a difference.
That
Yeah.
is. Now, speaking of climate, what's some of your favorite time of the year?
Well, usually my favorite times of the year is when there's no one here. Uh,
So this is perfect for you.
this, this is really, really good. I really like this. Yeah. Um, it's, um, but having said that, climate has been really, really difficult to guess these last few years. Um, Generally, 30 years ago, you would say December, January is brilliant. Um, but what we have is we tend to have an unsettled spring, followed by a long settled summer. And then over the years, that bit where it settles has moved from about mid-December now to about mid-January. But then you get a year that comes out and it's settled from December, and the next year comes out and it's settled from February. So who knows anymore?
So
But
it's not as consistent.
in general, if you want summer, I would say February, March, because that January, February period is a bit busy here, or it has been a bit busy. It's not too busy at the moment. Um, uh, so yeah, February, March was probably my favorite summertime. If I'm doing motorcycles or want slightly cooler weather for some outdoor activity, sort of hiking and whatever, I don't want too much heat, I would go April, late March, then April. And that's really, really nice weather for that sort of thing. And then the other side, our spring, November, December is pretty nice. But the thing about that November, December time is the weather is unsettled. So out of, let's say, 12 days here, you'd expect one of them to be rained off. Having said that, 10 people might get an absolutely phenomenal time with no rain at all, and one poor person might get 5 days of rain.
Right.
So you can't. It's difficult to predict the weather. Winter is beautiful here. You get absolutely crisp days, and it's lovely. But the big downer there's 2 downers for winter here, and our winter is June, July, August. One is a lot of the backcountry, what we call the backcountry, the remote areas, can be closed due to ice, to snow, and so on, safety. And the other downer on winter is shorter days, because in summer you've got 15, 16, 17 hours of daylight. You can go out and do all sorts of things. In winter, if you're not up and rolling by 9 a.m., then it's going to be dark before you actually achieve anything. That's a slight exaggeration. But winter, let's say you'd be light from 9 till about 5, 6. And you really do notice those extra hours when you're out having fun.
Still not bad. I mean, we're not talking Iceland here where you have just a few hours of daylight, but I can
No,
see.
it's not. Yeah, but it's also a lot further away than Iceland. So,
Yeah.
so to come all this way just to get a few hours of daylight. If you start measuring it in hours of daylight value, it's not so great.
Yeah. I could see that. Well, it's you have an absolutely beautiful country. I think we'll have to do this again. We'll have to talk about some of the food and the wine and some of the
Oh
other
yeah,
things, but let's save that for another time.
cool, cool. Yeah, foraging is a very big thing in this country. We love foraging for our food and then finding all sorts of ways to cook it. Yeah, but yeah, that's a whole new conversation.
Well,
You're right.
let's talk about that next time.
Cool.
Jean-Michel, I really appreciate it. It was lovely talking with you today. Thank you for sharing some stories about your lovely country.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Jason.